Good. Okay, welcome back. So the next report is from our CAO regarding fee waivers from various organizations. So Denise, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mayor Mills. So before council are three requests, as it is within the authority of council to waive fees. And staff had said in the past, we were going to always try to provide you with the information for you to make a decision with respect to the value of the waive that's requested. Noting as well in the financial section, it's been noted that fees being waived over $500 are supposed to be redirected to the grant program. But even with that said, we've brought forward this so you have an overview of what the requests are. So there's three specific requests. Each letter or email, most likely was an email letter that was received from each organization is provided in the appendices. And I will address the three requests in this order. First, from the Shelburne Cricket Club, secondly, from Town Fitness, and thirdly, from the Shelburne Rotary. So the first one is based on the Shelburne Cricket Club, which is currently assigned on an interim basis as of last year to utilize the field, which is a shared use with baseball at KTH Park. Our rates and fees are not dissimilar to many municipalities, that they're based on a game usage as opposed to an hourly rate. We've identified that we certainly need to look at an hourly rate where necessary. Cricket is an organization that, I shouldn't say an organization, is a game that has actually longer games. So on average, we understand that most are 4 to 6 hours of play, and our rates and fees certainly just don't reflect that. So we actually used what we could in terms of looking at a structure with the existing fees to estimate based on a schedule, whether it was 1 game a week, 2 games, or 3 games, what that value would be. So that's detailed, and you can see what the extracted fees are from the existing rates and fee schedule, with the most economical approach being $16.15 per game based on 3 scenarios, as I noted. So when I get back to the financial section, I will just summarize that. Additionally, that we don't have any contract finalized yet with the club because they're waiting for the decision of council with respect to the waiving of fees, I understand. And it's important for us as staff when we're booking a contract that we have at least more definitive uses defined. So it's not very easy for us to have an and or approach. We need to know in terms of those uses, in terms of bookings. That said, like 2020, 2021 is a very unusual year due to COVID-19. It has been noted in the financial section that our revenues to date are even less than we estimated they might be. We went with a $6,000 2021 budget, which is significantly less than 2020. And to date, the generated revenues are $150, knowing that many organizations are grappling with how to operate in 2021 with the restrictions in terms of contact and many sports in terms of the distance that's still required even during stage 2. So what we've looked at is estimating the fees using 2 scenarios at $19.95 per game as well, so that a 4-hour cricket match could be in one scenario $39.30 per game, in another scenario about $59 per game. And then the 3 scenarios there in terms of the ranges. So anywhere, the 3 ranges would be sweeping up anywhere from $630 to almost $2,800 plus HST, depending on which application we used and which fee was applied. I'm also going to note that in the 2021 budget, there was $10,000 included for cricket infrastructure for a temporary interim facility. We have ordered the mat, which was approximately $2,000. It is significantly heavy at 250 to 300 pounds is our estimate. We've also ordered to store that mat, which is needing to be taken out and installed for each game. A used CCAN, I didn't say used, but it is used. The new ones were well over $5,500 to $6,000 against that. And I have noted that it is our assumption that the club would help or be responsible for the installation and removal for each game. Town Fitness, like all fitness clubs, has been impacted by COVID-19 with a restriction on the use of their facilities for any type of programming or membership services. They've requested the use for Highland Park, similar to a program that they had in place for last year, so that they can run outdoor fitness clubs consistent with the COVID-19 staging. Currently it's up to 8 or 9, I think it's 8, or sorry, 9 users. And they've also indicated that they would make a free space or spaces available to members of the community as part of their program commitment. So they're looking at running a program starting July 2nd, running till October 31st, obviously, most likely weather permitting, running numerous days per week, which are scheduled Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And again, similar to a park, we usually have a park rental, which would make it cost prohibitive, which is what the letter referred to because staff didn't have anything else to really base this on. However, we've looked at how we can structure an opportunity, applying a creative solution using park rates similar to a ball game or a soccer game, because most of these classes are equivalent to that in terms of their length at about an hour. And again, it's a very small use. The last group, which is an organization that council has annually supported with respect to the waiving of fees, is for 2 events from the Shelburne Rotary in June and August, both of which require a day of setup. So the cost per day for park use is $200. 2 days is $400 each for a total of $800. So with respect to the financial, it's summarized there what Cricket would be looking at based on whether it's a 4-hour game or a 6-hour game, and those estimated values, again, ranging from $628.80 to up to about $2,900 plus HST. As well, for fitness, we've looked at a range, again, depending on what fee was utilized, from about $1,450 to $5,100. And again, Rotary is quite simple at $800. Have noted what the policy requires with respect to waiving of fees that was implemented in 2018, that anything over $500 is supposed to be redirected to the grant process. With the most recent, again, it's not noted, but I'll just verbally convey it, with the most recent review with the food, with the market, with the farmer's market being reinstated, the council did provide them with $2,000 worth of additional support. And that would leave a balance of only $900 or approximately $900 in that fund. I'm going to add verbally, again, sorry for the verbals, but this report was not about a waiving of fees for all organizations. But in 2020, council did provide an exemption due to COVID-19 with respect to all field and sport organizations that were Shelburne based to help them manage the significant loss of revenue with the cancellation of their season. Other communities have looked at compensating the organizations by having a percentage reduction applied across the board for all field organizations or sport users to help them in the same capacity as they did in 2020. Whether council wishes to do something like that to ensure equity across the board, I think it's critically important to note that even with our significantly reduced revenues and the fact that they're almost non-existent to date, in either scenario, if organizations cannot proceed with their seasons, there will be no revenue regardless, and the fields will not be used, nor will the parks that are being, I guess, potentially able to support other creative solutions for outdoor use for business. So hopefully that wasn't too quick, but if any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, questions for Denise? Councillor Wagner?
So if we just sort of waive the fees for these 3 organizations, businesses, whatever you want to call them, would we then have to see this done again if other organizations came to us? We have more than, one fitness place in town, for example. There's soccer and baseball that might still look at posting a season. And then, it's the potential that they will also, want to have the fees waived as well. So that we couldn't just decide tonight to waive the fees for all user groups, or can we?
To answer your first question, through the mayor, to answer your first question, I would suggest that if the fees were waived for all of, outside of the Rotary, because that's been a standard event-based provision for a one-off, you may expect other organizations to make the same requests, and then we would come back with a subsequent report. To your second question, yes, if council directed us, similar to the recommendation we made last year, to waive as a component of a COVID-19 strategy, there may be some organizations that have canceled their season that may consider resurrecting part of it if that was not a financial barrier for them. Yes.
Oh.
So, Carrie can weigh in more on this, but I guess it's balancing how many requests may come forward with the similar review and they don't want to proceed until they get that waiver. What does council see as value in terms of anchoring this to your council's strategic priorities? Again, this wasn't about unilateral or universal waiving of fees, but that may flow from that with respect to others asking for the same thing.
Yeah, I just
you limited it to sport field park users that were Shelburne based.
Right. I just, for me, it seems silly, I guess, if others are going to come forward, with taking more town staff time in order to come to us again with another report. So that's just my input. Thank you.
I tend to agree, Councillor Wagner. Sorry, Councillor Bernard, I'll get to you just in one quick sec. I'm assuming that if we were to do some sort of universal waiving of fees, that there's still a requirement on these groups to, book the fields or book the park. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I should interject that regardless of waiving a fee, similar to last year, we will not waive insurance.
Right. Okay. And
Insurance requirements would still be conditional, and it would not be for all events that are, say, business driven. We would assume that this is more for recreational sport use and local organizations. So we do have third-party business-like event use, and those are not profits, let's say, driven, but they're still generating revenue for the organization that's the host.
Okay. And then the second question is for Carrie. Rather than sort of attaching this to our community grant funding, is this something that we could draw on the COVID relief funding package from the province for? Because in my mind, it is very much tied to COVID. I mean, outside of COVID-19, we wouldn't be looking at doing this sort of thing. So in my mind, it's very much a result of the pandemic. So it would make sense that would be something we draw on. But you know the ins and outs of that funding better than I, Carrie.
So actually on June 30th is our first reporting that's required for the COVID funding. And there is approximately $12,000 left that we have yet to spend. And that's accounting for all of the reduced revenues that we experienced in our 2020 budget, because they were quite significant. Our 2021 budget won't see as much of a hit because we did automatically lower quite a few of those revenue budgeted amounts in anticipation of probably only having a half year of opportunity for that income. So between the budget itself and some of the inequities that are still going on due to COVID, and because of that remaining COVID funding, I think the budget can handle the waiving of fees for another season if council chooses to go that way.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo?
Wrong button there. I'm just wondering, you mentioned other municipalities did a percentage reduction of fees, and using some of that COVID money, is it possible to do something along that line across the board? And what did they reduce the fees by?
I believe, sorry to interject through the mayor, Orangeville, I believe, was a 30% reduction across the board. And we would have to look into what other municipalities actually did. There's some that have done 15 up to 50% as a solution as well. Again, it's across the board.
And the only reason I'm bringing it up is we put COVID money into the CDRC to assist them as part of the sport. And if we use the $12,000 and reduce the fees across the board, say by 50%, for that not make it a little more equitable, and at the same time not, again, everything we do is taxpayer driven at the end of the day, and I'm not sure I want to put that much taxpayers' money, into. I know that all of the sports and all of the things that happen are not necessarily all townspeople using it. Just a comment on my part.
Okay. Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Mills. I'm not sure when this was addressed. I lost connection. I guess just like you, having the same problem. Can't wait for Swift. In any event, I don't know if this was addressed when I was off, but the 250 to 300 pound mat, and I'm just thinking, like, who's going to lift and roll this baby out for these matches? I know it's assumed.
Volunteered to do that.
yeah, right. As long as I have some sort of disability benefits. But in all seriousness, I know that it's mentioned in the report that it's assumed. With it being that heavy, is that something that we could expect? Because I know if there's some sort of equipment that is required at that weight, or you just need 4 or 5 people to lift it up and it's easy to sort of lift and roll out once you get it out of the CCAN. But has that been discussed with the Shelburne Cricket Group as to why that assumption was made that they're going to be responsible for rolling it out and then putting it back in?
So my understanding, I'll let Jim speak to it, is that was discussed, that it takes about 3 people and it can be moved because staff had to move it. We did review that it can't remain in place because of shared use and it becomes a trip hazard for other users. So that's why we had to buy a CCAN of that length. 20 feet is a pretty big CCAN to ensure that it would fit easily and rolled with any other equipment that might be stored in there. But yeah, that was for staff to be doing it for every game. That would be additional fees and waivers that would need to be required, including many of those hours being on overtime. So,
okay. So your understanding is.
Sorry, so I think Jim had a chat with the.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, through your worship, that was our understanding, was that the cricket players themselves would install it, uninstall, and then if they had a storage bin that they could store it in, that the CCAN is just a little larger than what we were planning on for storage. But yeah, that was the understanding at the time when we discussed purchasing the mat. So.
Okay, so just about 3 individuals would be sufficient to get this thing down and then packed away. One of the other items, and maybe Jim, you could speak to this while I have you here, is one of the items that they also requested was to have those painted lines, right? And I remember initially when this was proposed, the question was whether they were responsible for putting the painted lines down, or whether that's something that we would do in sort of getting the field ready. Has that been resolved as to who would be responsible for that?
Through worship, normally with the other groups, the chalking of the outlined area or whatever is up to the people who run the game, whether it's soccer or baseball, that sort of thing. So I would be assuming that would be the same way. Our paint machine isn't going to do it on grass. It's not self-propelled, so it's a little much at well, loaded with paints around 300 pounds, so it just doesn't travel well in the grass either. So it would be more of a line stripe or that affair that they would be using, I would assume. So.
Okay, and just lastly, very quickly, the grass cutting, as you know, and something that I learned the past season, it has to be a certain height in order to make sure that the ball is traveling. And so that arrangement will continue with respect to making sure that the grass is at a certain height before these games, yeah?
Through your worship, yes. With our equipment that we have, the commercial mowers, we can only get down to a height of 1 inch. So they do make a few passes on it to get that down, and that it's not all clumpy. But yes, they've already been prepping it just so it doesn't get away on them, especially with the weather that we're having in the last week or so with the heat and the rain. So it's growing pretty quick. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Anybody else? So again, I mean, it seems like we have a couple of options. We can consider the recommendation, which is essentially to deal with these 3 specific requests in isolation, or we can take a bit of a more holistic approach and decide, to look at a waiver either in whole or in part across the board on a universal basis for all Shelburne based user groups. What do you guys want to do? I'm more inclined, I think, to go with a larger scale approach, whether we do a wholesale waiver or some percentage basis. But I agree with Councillor Wagner that it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to deal with these requests on a one-off basis and have staff reports coming back constantly. And I think being proactive on this may help some of our organizations jumpstart what may be otherwise a questionable season. Do you want to make a motion, Councillor Wagner?
Sure. If Shane wants to speak first.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Councillor Hall. Okay.
It was just quick.
So yeah, I again would look at more the holistic approach, all user based in Shelburne, and I again would fully support waiving of all fees.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, so that would be the motion that I would put forth. I appreciate Councillor Bonato's comment regards to taxpayers. And in regular times, I would not necessarily recommend this, but we are in COVID times right now, and I think a lot of people are struggling, and if we can help them, we should help them.
Okay. So can I note the motion made by Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Hall, that we received the report rather, and the council authorizes the waiving of all fees for the remainder of the 2021 season for all Shelburne-based user groups.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrie, is it possible to go a step further and indicate that any budgetary impacts should be directed to the extent possible to the Safe Restart funding?
Sure.
Is that okay, Councillor Wagner and Councillor Hall? Okay.
Yep, I think that's great. Thank you.
All right. Denise, sorry.
Sorry, I know I verbally said, but as long as it's understood, but the waiving of fees does not include insurance.
Yes. Maybe we should actually clarify that in the motion too, just so that user groups are clear on what their requirements are, so they still must book the field or park rentals and provide the standard insurance requirements. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on that? No? Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. All right, so next up is notice of motion from the last meeting. It was moved by Councillor Wagner. I'll read the motion first. I don't believe we had a seconder indicated. Okay, so I'll read the motion and then ask if there's a seconder. So the motion reads, be it resolved that due to recent speeding concerns within the community, the data collected from the speed signs to be reported to council, and the knowledge of this street being widely utilized by the community, especially the community's children, and keeping with providing public safety, council directs town staff to purchase and install temporary speed humps for an initial location of Greenwood Avenue in both the north and south traveling directions, to be accompanied by required signage, and furthermore, a speed sign to be reinstalled on Greenwood after installation of the temporary speed humps to gather information for a comparison of speeds pre and post installation, to be reported to council at a later date for review of any benefits in order to continue with installing speed humps elsewhere in town were identified as required from town staff's traffic speeding enforcement options report. And furthermore, in order to install immediately, funding be taken from the capital reserve. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hall? Question or?
Again, well, I would be supportive of it if we had something in it that allows or provides relief for bicycle/motorcycle safe travel. Generally, speed humps go across the entire lane. And again, as I mentioned previously, motorcycles and bicycles, especially in Greenwood, seeing that it has multi-purpose with the signage down, I have concern that that might be an issue.
Okay, so before we get into other discussion, then what, are you okay to second it for now for discussion purposes, and then we can see if we can, okay, just to get it on the floor, okay? Yep. Councillor Fegan, and then I saw Denise had her hand up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lindsay, I agree with you 100% that we need to do something about speed in this town for sure. I have very serious concerns with speed humps as Councillor Hall has brought up, especially motorcycles and bikes. It's not a pretty sight watching them go over. Our liability issues as a town with damage that can be done to vehicles as well. Speed humps cause an awful lot of damage in a lot of cases and can certainly increase our liability. Jennifer, if you got a second, can you pull up that picture or a group of pictures that I sent you already? Thank you. Okay, so what we're looking at here is another initiative or other initiatives that I've seen in other municipalities. This was actually brought to my attention by Dave McLagan. He's a staff sergeant with the Dunfermline detachment of the OPP. And he was talking to me when we welcomed our SPD boys back. What this is essentially they'll take pylons, speed pylons, put a large one right in the middle of the road, and then they'll put subsequent ones on the edge of the road, which gives you a visual deterrent and subconsciously slows the drivers down. I've subsequently had conversations with Terry Ward, who is our what is he? He's another higher up in the OPP. In the definite. Sorry, Terry, if you're watching today, I can't remember what your title is, so forgive me for that.
Inspector.
Thank you. So yeah, I was talking to him at the golf tournament as well and asked his thoughts on these. And both of their consensus was that they're actually very, very effective. And the thing that I like about this kind of an initiative, rather than the speed humps, is the liability for us is mitigated. And certainly we don't have to worry about any people dumping their bikes going over the speed humps. We don't have to worry about damage being done to cars. Jim, I see that you're still on as well. I did send this to you after I talked to Dave McLagan to look into. Do you have any input as to your thoughts on these?
Through your worship, we have used those for a number of years in front of Town Hall during the summer months. Then we removed them in the winter and put up the temporary barrels in front of the office. So we have used them. We haven't had any complaints from them. I know other municipalities that have used them. There has been concern that potential there for scratching vehicles if they're not paying enough attention, going down the side of the vehicle and then possibly causing a claim. But they are flexible. We've also used them over at the ones showing actually in those photos of there's a permanent mount that we put out for the farmers market right off Owen Sound Street. So we've used them over there too. So we have used them in the past. You'd want to have some background on it to make sure where you were placing them was a necessity again, but that's data that we collect from the speed signs.
So for me personally, I mean, if Councilor Wagner were interested in modifying the motion into looking into this kind of initiative, I'd be fully supportive of it as well.
Okay. Councillor Wagner, if you could just hold your thought for a second, I'll just go to Denise and then we'll come back, and then Councillor Bernardo.
So staff certainly respect and appreciate council's engagement with the community and how concerned they are about speeding and how critical it is that it doesn't happen. But given the scope of questions that you're asking us, I think this is truly indicative of why a staff report and the analysis that you need should be provided to you on such a request. We would like a staff to also consult with EMS as part of any engagement process for any kind of mitigation, as well as parking impacts, as well as placement, let alone the costs are probably the least significant. We can provide that analysis pretty quickly. We know many communities have experienced, Councillor Fagan, with the ones that you showed us. And in some situations, unfortunately, they didn't last 24 hours before they were removed in terms of people actually taking them out. So if you could just let us come back with analysis, I think that would be very helpful. We'd also want to talk to our insurer to ensure that the liability for any solution that was implemented was known with respect to any impacts it might have on that throughfare. Greenwood is not a short street in terms of locations, but an immediate solution that we were going to recommend as staff, because it was suggested before and the delay has been the connecting link, is that one immediate solution could be to move forward with the entire community, the connecting link, remove from that and reduce it to 40 kilometers and supplement that with the speed slashing signs that we found are very effective and complement that with enforcement at the same time. And then we can still look at speed humps, traffic control measures as a supplemental approach, but have that 40 kilometers as an immediate solution.
Okay. Councillor Wagner.
Okay, so I understand the points of view from everyone that's already spoken. I don't know. I'm sort of stuck with thoughts here. So I have spoken, obviously, because I know that the concern was brought up over motorcycles and bicycles. So I have reached out to some community members that are motorcycle enthusiasts, and I've asked them, you know, how do you feel about going over, you know, speed humps and whatnot? And, you know, the consensus across the board was if the motorcycle is doing the speed limit, they're not as dangerous as, you know, somebody might say. You know, if you're speeding, yeah, of course, you're gonna dump your bike. But if you are doing the speed limit and or less because you know, because of the signage, that you were coming up to speed humps, you know, someone who's a motorcycle enthusiast should know how to control their bike, and they would be safely, you know, be able to travel over them. Another consensus across the board was that with signage, some motorcycle enthusiasts will choose a different route if they are, you know, feeling insecure about traveling over the speed humps. I have, you know, seen larger cities as Barrie, for one, uses speed humps. I recently drove over speed humps on Kingfisher in Orangeville. So, you know, these are measures that are used in other towns. We wouldn't be the first town to utilize something like this. You know, our Orangeville, our neighbor, has decided that, you know, this is a measure that they can use, that they feel safe enough to use as well. You know, Greenwood, for me, it's a highly traveled road, which I understand, both, you know, people using their bikes, their motorcycles, cars, feet, but it's also highly used, you know, by our children in the community, traveling back and forth from Circle K to the park and whatnot. So, you know, I'm not going to put the blame solely on visitors, but, you know, the time that you would use these temporary speed humps, we see a very large increase in those who don't have an invested interest in our town, and they are just trying to get through the town as quickly as possible. You know, some of these roads have been identified as an artery in order which to do that, so that they can sort of use it as a bypass for the downtown core. So we're finding that these major roads, Greenwood, Fiddle Park, even Simon Street for that matter, people are choosing to use as bypasses, and they're speeding up them. Recently I had a community member approach me who had to physically push their child out of the way before the car stopped inches from taking them out in the knee. And that happened on Greenwood. So as much as I can understand and support, your wanting to come back to council with more reports and more information. And I can appreciate that COVID causes delays and you've been very busy. I just don't know how long we need to continue to wait in order to implement something that will be of at least a decent measure that will make a notable change. The speed signs are wonderful, and the community members have spoken to me about them as well, and said that they do appreciate them. However, they're still not slowing people down. They're I'm assuming that when we get the reports, you will see that people are speeding up these roads. Because as much as they are a visual deterrent, they're not a physical deterrent. So, my concern there is if you are doing the speed limit, you are slowing down, there should be absolutely no damage to your vehicle. There should be nobody spilling their bikes over, their motorcycles over, because you are taking those cautions, which is exactly what the speed humps are supposed to do. They're supposed to slow you down and make you cautious about going over them. So, again, my concern with Council Fegan's signs or things in the middle of the road are with people not necessarily paying attention, distracted driving. How likely are those to stay in place for an extended period of time? My concern with those are as they will be hit and they will be knocked down. And then we have a liability because people are hitting them with their vehicles and causing damage to their vehicles that way. Just as Jim had mentioned, not that I'm saying Jim is for or against, but again, not paying attention, scraping the sides of the vehicle, knocking off window, side mirrors and things like that. I wish I didn't even have to come to council with this. If drivers were more responsible and could obey the speed limits, this wouldn't be a concern, in our town. But it's the one thing that we are supposed to do as councillors. We're supposed to speak for the people, and consensusly lately the talk and the concerns have been speeding, and not just on Greenwood, everywhere. So it's our job to try to defer that and try to make sure that it doesn't continue to happen, and to do so as soon as possible. That's just my thoughts. I'm still open to hear anyone else's, and if we have to change the motion to do a different method, then I'm open for that as well. But I just need something to I think we need something to happen soon. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Bernardo?
I live near Greenwood, and I walk right down Greenwood every day, morning and night. People talk to me because I walk right by most of the area. Plus, I have to back out from time to time because my mother-in-law lives on Greenwood, and it is a hard road to back out of, especially on a Friday night with traffic going through. Speeding is an issue. I don't agree with the speed bumps. I don't think they're going to do it. It's a wide road. It's a connecting road for smaller roads. I would see them easily on smaller roads, narrower roads. William Street, for example, would be probably a good street for it. I know Inspector Ward suggested at Police Services Board a while back that we put in those, Deputy Mayor Anderson spoke to me about it as well, putting in, there are speed signs, but they give us that time of day when the speeders are going through. The current ones do not. And I think we need more police enforcement and police knowing exactly where they have to be when speeding is happening. That is, without like, it's a 40-kilometer road to begin with. So changing the speed, unless you put it down lower than 40 kilometers, I don't know what else you can do to stop speeders on that road. The majority are not, like you said, are not necessarily visitors, though they do come through on the weekend and speed down the road. They are our own people within the community that are trying to get home at certain times of the day to wherever they have to go, whether they're speeding in the, and the worst is between 6 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the morning, and then turn around at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock at night to about 7 o'clock at night, speeders going down Greenwood because they have to get home or get to work. That is the times I see them speeding up and down. The other complaint I got was noise. A lot of people are complaining about noise, be they noisy mufflers on cars or be they motorcycles that speed up and you hear them when, especially the Harley Davidsons, they can hear the throaty roar out of the motorcycles. That's a secondary complaint I got, you know, going down those streets. How do we solve it? Again, police enforcement. And we can't get police enforcement if we don't know what times they're required to be and what spots they need to be at. So I think Inspector Ward's suggestion, and I don't know the exact name of the thing itself. Deputy Mayor Anderson had the name, and I've lost it in my memory. Knowing exactly what times people do the things they do will assist in helping our people on Greenwood Street. That to me is more the solution, making sure that we know exact times and exactly what's happening in way of data so that the police can be there and enforce it. That's just and I won't support speed bumps.
Okay, thank you. In terms of Councillor Bonato's comment there about the information from these signs, the signs that we currently have, is that information being provided to the OPP currently, even though it may not provide, you know, times of day?
Through your worship, yes, they've requested that from staff, and we've sent that data over to them.
Okay.
You do go into the functions of the signs, you can actually pull up the time of day for any of the speed events. So you can see when your speed events are, it'll give you the time of day. So that's what they're reviewing right now. We did have a request from the OPP this morning. They had one officer directly put on Shelburne's speed issues. So they're going to review all that data. And we're actually going to give them access to the sign data themselves, similar to what Shelburne Police Services had access to before too. So they can just log in, pull the information off themselves. We just have to get staff to give them a bit of training on them. Each one of these sign providers is a little bit different, so but they do have that information. So.
Okay. So our current signs do provide time of day information?
Yes.
Okay.
Worship, it's a little tricky, but once you get into the program, Joanne and our staff, she's able to pull up the times on it. There's like 3 different information sheets that can give you the data. So traffic volumes, the speeds, and then the time of day on there as well. So.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Anderson, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you. And this is just a follow-up to Councillor Bonato, but I'm actually glad to hear what Jim said, because the device that Councillor Bonato was referring to is the Black Cat device, and other municipalities are apparently using that, and that was brought up at the Police Services Board as to whether at least the board should get into a cost sharing with respect to that product, because it does provide greater detail and allows for a better deployment of resources to address what is maybe perception versus reality. But if the current signs, because I was going to bring a motion maybe to suggest that we look into getting that information, because if the OPP is recommending that, and it would help them to determine whether in fact there is speeding. One of the comments that he made, sometimes when you see more traffic on a street, you assume maybe that cars are speeding, and that may not necessarily be the case. But this device would really be able to show or demonstrate to the public that in fact, you know, you really do have a speeding issue or you don't. And again, it would assist them in the deployment. But again, if this current device that we're using is able to provide them with that resource, then maybe we give that a try first. and then see whether the OPP feels that that's good enough. And if not, then we could revisit maybe the option of obtaining this black cat. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For my part, Councillor Wagner, I certainly don't want to discount speed humps, but personally, I'm not prepared to support a motion to immediately implement them without some further analysis. The same would go, Councillor Fegan, for the pylon style. There's obviously a whole host of options out there. And just because they may work on a particular street in a neighboring municipality doesn't necessarily mean that translates to Greenwood Street in Shelburne, for example. So I mean, I would like to see a bit of a deeper dive in terms of the analysis on that before we go down that path. But that's just me. So we do have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. So if there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and vote on that. Not seeing any other hands, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? Okay, so that motion is defeated. Now, only because Denise raised it as another option, is there an appetite to consider sort of a blanket reduction of speed within town to 40 kilometers an hour, keeping in mind that would exclude the connecting link portions? Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect? Councillor Wagner? Okay. Councillor Bernardo, are you seconding that? Okay. Okay. So Denise, just to be clear, in terms of implementation for that, what would have to happen? We have to amend our bylaw?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'll work with Jennifer, or Jennifer's on now, to go through the processes required. We will still continue to work with the MTO to get support for the connecting link as well, but that may still take some time. But this is an immediate, or I shouldn't say immediate, it'll still take a little bit of time to do some provisions, but it's similar to what Orangeville, they have signage when you enter their community that all roads are 40 kilometers.
Okay. So if the motion for tonight said something to the effect that, we're directing staff to take immediate steps to implement a 40 kilometer an hour speed limit throughout the town of Shelburne, with the exception of the connecting links, does that give you guys enough direction to come back with bylaw amendments and everything else you need?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we would differentiate. There are some areas that are 40 that are designated community safety zones, similar to where schools are. The fines associated with those areas is significantly more than a standard speeding ticket. We would have to look at whether the entire town was designated a community safety zone, but that needs to be justified. But a 40 kilometer ticket, a ticket in a 40 is hopefully a very meaningful deterrent. And the OPP would also be advised of this direction for enforcement purposes.
Okay. All right. So we have that motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on that? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Wagner.
Yeah, that sounds great. And now, in order to amend the bylaws, can that be done before the next meeting? How fast can we implement something like this then?
Jennifer?
Through your worship, I can have a amending bylaw to council for the next meeting at July 12th. Council has to pass an amendment. We then have to send it off to Ministry of Attorney General for short form wording. It can be implemented and brought forward to council for July 12th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, so the next notice of motion from last meeting was moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, and it reads as follows. Be it resolved that staff investigate and report to council in October 2021 the cost to implement a sidewalk along County Road 124 from the Fieldgate subdivision to the Lakeview subdivision and the potential options to cover the costs. Was there a seconder for that motion at the last meeting? I don't recall. Councillor Bernardo, are you seconding that? Okay. Okay, Deputy Mayor Anderson, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we heard our planner talk about, as I posed the question, about working with the developer, working with the county with respect to installing a sidewalk for safety purposes. I think everybody understands that something needs to be done to ensure safety along that route. Steve made it very clear that it's likely to fall on the municipal plate with respect to cost associated, whether we can work something out with the developer or otherwise. But I think it's time that we at least have the conversation, and I put October to give, at least I believe, staff to have enough time to consider the option and to report back to council as to the cost of that installation. So that's basically the motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bernardo.
I fully support the initiative of finding out the costs and getting back to us. This has been an ongoing discussion for quite a while since we've discussed the Fieldgate subdivision. People do walk down 124. It is dangerous. I've seen them numerous times when I've driven down from the Lakeview subdivision towards Highway 89, or whether they go to No Frills or Tim Hortons or any other future shopping areas we're going to have in town. It's just too darn dangerous for people to be walking on the side of the road. And if we have speeding problems on Greenwood, imagine the issues of traffic we have on 124. So safety should be a concern of all of us at council, and 124 to me, having a sidewalk down there just makes sense. And this is something that we need to progress forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I know I've mentioned in the past, and I mean, by no means is this offered through the lens of an engineering perspective, but even something that is sort of a non-traditional sidewalk, but something more in line with the trailway that runs essentially from No Frills to Fiddle Park, which is set back a little bit further off the road, but at least provides a walking trail, and that could go from one controlled intersection at Wansboro Way, and then south down to the new entrance into the Fieldgate subdivision. So I mean, there's options there. I don't think it necessarily has to be a traditional sidewalk in the sense that there's curbs and gutters and storm sewers installed. We could look at something more in line with a trail type system. But I think the general intent is let's provide pedestrians with some safe way of getting from point A to point B without walking along the shoulder of what is essentially a highway, and oftentimes pushing baby strollers. So if there's nothing else, then we'll call the question on this one. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. All right, and the last item is a letter from the Shelburne Public Library. The letter's contained in the agenda package, but essentially what they're looking for, they're proposing on two separate days, being July 20th and August 24th, to have a page from a storybook posted on a sign, I guess similar to a yard sale sign, and they would like to post these signs through Walters Creek Park, and they'll have posters explaining how those participating in the program can do so in a COVID-19 safe way. And essentially what they are looking for is approval to use Walters Creek Park and then allow them to place the signage in the park using metal ground stakes. So the recommendation from staff is that's fine, with the one condition that they get Ontario One locates before they post the signs, just so they're not interrupting any gas or hydro or telecommunication lines. Any thoughts on this? Anybody prepared to move that? Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, on to Councillor motions. I know Councillor Fegan at least has one this evening. Councillor Fegan, do you want to read your motion into the record?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so this goes along with the comments that were made in public question period at the beginning of the meeting. So I guess I'll just read it into the record and we can go from there. So, whereas in December 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report, including 94 calls to action directed to governments at each level to further reconciliation between Canadians and Indigenous peoples. And whereas, in light of the unmarked graves being discovered on the properties of the Kamloops and Saskatchewan residential schools, we must move our country and our governments beyond words of condolences and towards actions that advance truth and reconciliation. We must recommit to advancing the calls for action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. These actions must be far-reaching and must work to advance access to housing, clean water, prosperity, and justice for all Indigenous people in partnership with Indigenous communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council refers the 9 calls to action that were directed at municipal governments to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for further consideration, and ask that the committee report back to Council with recommendations for implementation of those calls to action which are locally applicable. And that the town of Shelburne, in a unified stance with our Indigenous neighbors, do hereby call on the federal and provincial governments to honor the calls to action directed at those levels of government. And that this resolution be forwarded to the following: the Office of the Prime Minister of Canada, Right Honourable Justin Trudeau; Office of the Premier of Ontario, Honourable Doug Ford; Dufferin-Caledon MP, Kyle Seaback; Dufferin-Caledon MPP, Sylvia Jones; and all Dufferin County municipalities.
Okay, thank you. So we will consider that motion at the next meeting. Councillor Bernardo and then Councillor Wagner.
I'd like to ask if council would consider it at this meeting and that we all drop the, what am I looking for?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know what you mean. So yeah, on unanimous consent, we can consider this motion tonight.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to do that. Is there anybody who objects to considering it?
That was actually going to be my my comment as well, is that we just vote on it tonight.
Okay.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, not seeing any objections. Okay, the motion's on the floor, duly seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay. All right, thank you, Councillor Fegan.
Thanks, guys.
Any other notices of motion? Okay, seeing none, on to communications. 11 items listed in our package this evening. Is there anything there that anybody wants to spend some more time on? No? Okay. If not, can I get a motion then to receive the items listed under communication for information? Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. A mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor?